Hello and welcome to a roundtable discussion focused on human rights. This event is organized by Đồng Hành, a network for young Vietnamese who focus on Vietnamese identity, culture, and advocacy. We were developed as a program of Viet Tân, which is a political organization advocating for democracy and human rights in Vietnam. For many in the Vietnamese overseas community, April 30th is known as Black April, or Tháng Tư Đen, because the outcome of the war in 1975 led to the fall of Saigon and South Vietnam, as well as the start of an exodus of approximately 2 million people seeking asylum in many countries outside of Vietnam. One of the values that so many sacrificed their lives for was the protection of human rights, to live freely with dignity and equality. This value continues to be fought for by Vietnamese people living all over the world. In line with the spirit to defend human rights, we are excited to host today's roundtable discussion among a panel whose perspectives reflect a generation removed from the physical violence of war, but who continue to see the value of ensuring that human rights are respected. With us here today are those of the next generation living in Australia, Europe, and the US, but who all feel Vietnamese, even if we communicate better using English. With that, please let me introduce Thao, a high school student who is half Vietnamese and half Korean, and whose maternal grandparents were refugees and left after the fall of Saigon. Thao currently lives in California. Hong Mi, a digital content creator in her early 30s, originally an international student and now a digital activist who resides in Australia. Mai, a psychologist in her mid-20s and a second-generation Danish Vietnamese whose parents are refugee boat people. She was born and raised in Denmark. And for the context of this discussion, for my own positionality in this conversation, I am a lecturer of political science in my mid-30s. I'm a second-generation Vietnamese American within a family who were refugee boat people. I was born and raised in California. So to start off our conversation, we just wanted to have a ground of what does human rights mean to you? Tao, as our youngest member for this roundtable discussion today, would you like to share what human rights means to you?
Of course, thank you. I think human rights boils down, for me personally, freedom of speech and expression. Especially as like a young girl, I think it's often taken for granted, especially since I live in the United States. But being able to go to school and actually be encouraged and allowed to share my opinions on topics is really a privilege and is really a right that a lot of us don't realize we're lucky to have. Like on my speech team, we're actually encouraged to talk about issues not only domestically but also globally. With extemporaneous and international extemporaneous speech, we're given topics and able to discuss and debate them. And also, freedom of speech isn't just an oral right, it's also through expression. So, art. Like in my ceramics class, my teacher encourages us to use ceramics as a way to advocate and talk about issues that we're really focused on. And maybe they're sensitive. Maybe not everyone agrees or has the same opinions on these issues, but we're encouraged to do that. And we can advocate and express ourselves through art, which is something people in Vietnam aren't allowed to have.
Thank you so much for sharing your own personal experience with human rights in regards to that, and that it goes beyond just saying things, right? That you can also express it through art or intangible types of things. I'd like to next invite Mai to share your own definition of what human rights means.
Hi, thanks, Zuyang. For me, human rights is an idea or a concept that humans were born with fundamental rights. And basically, as I do think it's like a modern society kind of view that we were born with certain rights, and it kind of aims to protect the well-beings of humans. And so for me, I am privileged to be born in a country that prides itself on democracy values, and a country that um, extremely loves to take care of their people. So we have free education system, we have free healthcare, and therefore I am very thankful to be born after my parents fled from Vietnam after 1975. And so, as Tao also said, it's something that we do take for granted. So I think it's important to have this type of discussion sometimes, and kind of see the past different aspects that are in our daily lives that we kind of take for granted. Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's a great setting because I think that you've also narrowed down that human rights is an idea and concept that either we can shape and build as a society, so that gives us a good grounding to understand like what is human rights, right? And then to show and showcase how it affects or how it transpires in Denmark, because one of the aspects that is within human rights is this idea of social cultural kind of economic freedom that is allowed, where in the United States, that civil and political part of human rights is very much emphasized. So it makes sense for Tao to describe that freedom of expression is kind of at a root of her understanding of human rights as well. So we're kind of getting a whole picture of what human rights can look like. So I'd love to invite Homi, your experience of understanding human rights.
Yeah, thank you, Yun. Yep. So, to my understanding, I think human rights, by definition, are basic rights of a human being, which consist of the right to live, the right to voice our concern, the right to demand essential, or the right to worship as they wish. I don't want to say I'm not that lucky because I was born in Vietnam, where like human rights is not really respect and being exercised. But yeah, until I come to Australia, so that when I can see more and can be more freedom in the ways like I can speak what I think, I can do what I really want, and I can raise my voice or like stand up for people when I see it wrong or something not right. That is in my country, where you can't freely say it out loud. Or just example, like when this is my own experience. Like I went to uni in my country, and my teacher told me when I say it's like I'm Christian, I'm Catholic, and she's like, okay, so you can't say this, you can't say that because you're Catholic, and you can't do that in our country because Catholic always like fan don't. So that you guys always try to against the government and do the bad thing and like that. So to me, it's a deep migration, and when you want to raise your voice and you want to stand up for yourself, you can't like graduate the uni just because you say you stand up for your own rights.
Thank you, Homi, so much for sharing something so personal and bringing up another right that human rights tends to capture, which is religion, and how that actually really connects personally with you and your experience in Vietnam, right? I didn't even know that even at the university level, they were restricting that type of expression and that it has repercussions. And that's what happens, I think, when we see people or countries, the states, government trying to prevent the promotion of human rights, that it has reverberating effects, right? Not only did it silence you in the moment of the classroom, but then your prospects of graduating was very different. So my next question to all our panelists is, you've kind of touched on it a little bit of how it's personally affected you. I think that's how we understand human rights to come to the definition. But maybe you can add to the story, Homi, regarding how either the defense of human rights has affected your life or just human rights in general, how you see it shaping your life now.
Well, to me, I think human rights have made me recognize basic rights of human beings that I never had a chance to understand and appreciate. And like Thao said before, like we always take it like granted. But really, in Vietnam, maybe we don't have that. We do have that, but we never have that really. So I don't want to say like we take it granted. But I feel more lucky now because I live here in the country. They really respect democracy. They respect human rights, and they let us practice it every day, and we have it every day. So I feel sorry and I feel bad for all the people still back in Vietnam that they don't see it, and because the way the government treats them, and they just think like, okay, yeah, what the human rights, and they don't want it, or even like they try to fight for it, they still can't get it. So to me, I feel really lucky, and here now I have a chance to understand and appreciate, and then I have it right now. So that's why I want to fight for my people, like my Vietnamese people. Yeah.
You bring up a really a point that helps me remember a phrase that Martin Luther King, I tend to attribute it to him, which is injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that sense and feeling that you have, that sorry that you're saying, I think it's that pull to want to help lend a voice when you have that capacity to. So Mai and Tao, you've expressed that growing up in a place where where the promotion of human rights, or just to freely express yourself and have these different opportunities, how has that shaped your life? I'll go with Mai for now.
I think it's very interesting for me, who was born and raised in Denmark, to hear Hommi's story of her seeing the differences between being born in Vietnam and then the human rights or basic rights there, and then now moving to Australia and clearly see the differences. And for me, it kind of gives me, like, the only time I have seen the differences is only through my parents, right? Like they tell me, they give me examples and stories of the difference experience they have growing up in Vietnam, and then they seeing it now here in Denmark. So it gives me a view, or I guess more gratefulness for these privileges I was born with, being born in Denmark. And so it kind of emphasizes my beliefs in that it is so important for us to keep talking about human rights, even though we were born outside of Vietnam. Because I guess, yeah, the privilege part is such an important part of it. And so when we have the rights, freedom of expression, we should use it more. And therefore, it kind of just, I guess, enhances my beliefs that what I'm doing is right. And not just because of my parents, who have been basically pushing these ideals on me, right? Because that's the only way I've experienced the differences. But to also communicate and talk with someone like me. And so that in those aspects, it has affected me a lot.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. Our understanding is shaped kind of by the environment, right, where we grow up. But in that, as we come of age, all of us being labeled kind of like tiny or young, right, we take into action. And through those actions, we get to experience and understand it even more. And going back to our phrase of not taking things for granted, really see that play out, right, by taking action. Tao, how would you say the advocacy of human rights or human rights itself affected your life?
Well, I gotta say that I'm from a family that always has been aware of it and always talks and keeps reminding us about how lucky we are and how important it is to carry on the advocacy of human rights, just like Mai was saying. I mean, I think the majority of us, if not all of us, who are in some way, shape, or form Vietnamese, were born from this great injustice against human rights. after the fall of Saigon and the Vietnam War. It was injustice against not only the safety of people, but also their political freedom. And being born from that injustice, a lot of us have been galvanized to move on with human rights. And it's something I've observed in the United States too, because personally, I think human rights also equals women's rights. And in California, I've had the opportunity to get involved in the state government, to talk about issues that affect girls. Like there's this organization that's a state-run thing called the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls, and they have a youth advisory council. So it's all these girls from all different counties of California, and we get to advise these adult women who are legislators in our state about issues that affect us, like girls' safety, girls' education, girls' health. And it's just enforced this idea in me that it's my responsibility and it's my privilege that I'm able to advocate, and that we should all, in one way, shape, or form, find an opportunity to talk about human rights.
I think, especially with your experience, Tao, is that opportunity to go and be involved in shaping policy. With that, we kind of describe the processes or the experiences, but with that comes the feelings and what it's like to actually go about it. Tao, I wonder if you could share, what was it through that experience you had going to legislature? Like, what was it like for you?
Well, I gotta say, I did meet so many cool women, um, who are like a generation older than me, but they're not that different. And they talked about how they were growing up and they didn't see a lot of women in legislature. And they are the new role models to us. And they encouraged us to keep on dreaming, keep on believing. But also, I noticed, and a lot of my mentors talked about this, how there was still corruption in government and how money has influence, political power has influence, and money and people with all this power, they talk and they can change laws and make it more difficult for change makers and people who actually care about the communities they serve to make differences. And so I think when I was reminded of all the reports of corruption in Vietnam and how people weren't allowed to express their political opinions or government opinions, I was reminded of this. It's not just an issue in Vietnam. It's not just an issue in the United States. It's an issue everywhere. And I'm really glad to meet these wonderful women on this panel and everyone really who's been fighting and encouraging me to keep an optimistic view and how corruption shouldn't drive all government. It should be something that we're trying to weed out and actually oppose.
Yes, indeed, and I think you speak to the that the what prevents human rights from being shared just openly is a level of greed that filters into why people carry out corruption, right? And that it's endemic in any type of kind of society and institution. And this hope of us coming together with like-minded people to champion justice in some ways is that hope that we can see. Continuing on, Tao, one of the things that you described was how the war had affected your family, and then continues on that as kind of our opening of the theme, and that continues on, which is advocating for human rights. So I wanted to see all of your opinions, since our roots are all based in Vietnam, what your thoughts are on the current situation in Vietnam and how you approach it yourself. So I'll go back to Mai.
Well, I think it's very complicated as well because the idea, or for me, the idea of human rights is a concept that is kind of social constructed, and then it's kind of something that everyone in the Western world are just, since we're born in this democratic world, um, we just believe this is the truth, right? But I think, um, who are we to say? I mean, like, it's so complicated. But like, who are we to say that what they're doing in Vietnam is against the human rights? Because those are our beliefs, right? But I do think that as Hami talks about, like, human rights is also basic rights and rights to live. And I do believe human rights, it aims to protect the well-beings of humans, right? So when um, our people or some people in Vietnam, they get silenced for speaking out, of so basically the violation of freedom of expression, right? And then they get punished for just voicing their opinion or being environmentalist. I think those affect us outside of Vietnam as well, because those are topics and subjects that we agree on, and we think those are the rights too. And therefore, it hurts us that there are people who cannot express themselves the way we openly can outside. And therefore, when we do have the privilege and opportunity to speak on their behalf, we try to advocate for them, we try to lobby for them. And so, in those aspects, it has kind of shaped and made me more grateful to be able to speak on behalf of other people whose rights are being limited or violated. Um, yeah, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And you began to sharing kind of your hesitation, right? I grew up in kind of a more democratic Western society. Do I have a place to say anything? And that is a lot, I think, a sentiment, me, myself growing up, right, overseas, the worry that some of us in like the next section generation and on feel like, do we have a say? But just in context about what human rights and its definition now in the modern time was a collaborative effort by initially like the 50 something countries that first founded the United Nations, right? And those countries were both developed and underdeveloped areas. So there was a mix of culture and a lot of debate going on to solidify, right, the 30 kind of articles that represent the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And its evolution over time speaks to kind of why we wanted to have the conversation today, is that next week, Vietnam goes up for review on the Universal Periodic Review. And this mechanism was instituted more recently within 2006, and its first kind of hearing was in 2008. And this mechanism is an attempt to balance out the fact that all countries are being reviewed for their human rights, right? To create that universal idea and concept that no matter where you are or what you do, there will be an eye out to ensure that human rights is protected. So in that line, to how you have grown to kind of feel like there is some injustice going on, why I need to speak out, is really relevant to that process at the international level as well. Homie, do you have any thoughts on, as you you grew up in Vietnam and then now being abroad, your thoughts on the current situation in Vietnam?
Like as you all know, right now Vietnam is under communist ruling. So human rights are more violated than exercised or observed. And one major concern is, like I said before, that most people in Vietnam right now, they don't even know they have all these basic rights. And so that gives the communist government the leverage to get things done their way unnoticed. Like, for example, like recently you guys heard about the Bùi Tuấn Lâm, aka An Bear. He just copied the action of Solvay sprinkling just salt on the expensive steak for police minister Tô Lâm, and now he's serving 5.5 years in prison. And also, there's a lot of people, they just express their feeling or their view or their political opinions on social media and then in prison. And I think with that, like here now we in Australia or in United States or anywhere in the world, when we say or we do something like making fun of something like that, well, it's just a joke and we just laugh at it and everyone just enjoy it like nothing. But in Vietnam it's different. You're gonna be in the prison and maybe you can't get out of it because you're gonna be die when the authorities asking the question and yeah they beat you to death. So to me that it's just like you can't even have right to laugh or making fun of something. So it's not right at all. And here we can say out loud like, oh, I can talk about the politics, about the prime minister if they do something not right, or about anything you think you wanna say. But in my country, no, it's not like that. Like I mean, in Vietnam, and even like now here, I wanna say something on my Facebook example, and my friends in Vietnam just message me like, "Oh, stop doing it," because with that you can't go back to Vietnam, or with that the police gonna go to your house and harass your family and all those things. And I think like, no, with all this, it's just I just say it's the wrong thing what the government do, or even like the corruption is that it just happened right now there. So why I just can't share it for people, and with that inside Vietnam you can't see it on the social media because like nowadays Facebook, TikTok, or all the social media they just about money or like benefits, and when government jump in they have to stop because they just Facebook they just stop all the people they want to say it about their rights or the thing wrong in Vietnam. And come to myself like now I'm a digital content creator, and I do have some TikTok accounts or Facebook accounts just spread out the human rights or all the activities outside Vietnam or even things happen in Vietnam, and they just block all my accounts just because I just want to say the corruption right now in Vietnam.
So you described that you're currently being censored on these different social media platforms as a digital creator. How does that make you feel?
Yeah. So when I first found out about that, I was really upset. Of course, we all know, yeah, social media, Facebook, TikTok, or others platform. They just come to Vietnam because that is the really big market for the money, and because a lot of like 95% of Vietnamese, they're using all the platform. And talking about that, maybe from my point of view, I think because in Vietnam, what makes you feel like you really live is just go on YouTube, just go on Facebook, and just scrolling the screen all day, because that make you feel like, oh, you living your person and you're human. Because other than that, you just can't do anything because you just can't. You don't have really good job there. A lot of people, they still like really hard to find a job or to survive every day. So in the meantime, they just only go on social media just to make they feel good, or just to make them like feel like, oh, to see the other people in the world, they still can enjoy their life, or to don't have to worry about, oh, what I'm gonna eat tomorrow, just like that. So when my platform got blocked from sharing about the Vương Đình Huệ and all other like a prime minister or minister got corruption, they blocked me. I was not surprised really about that, but also upset because Facebook, TikTok, they from the Western countries, and they know, they understand about the human rights, but they still got the bad influence from communist government and block people from sharing their thought, their views, and their fight for the human rights. So that's not right at all. And not just me, but a lot of people and a lot of organizations been talking about that, and still it still happens. So yeah, it's really sad. Yeah.
Yeah. So you bring up two kind of different institutions that are restrictive of our kind of promotion of human rights. First, kind of setting the tone of describing the political system in Vietnam, right? And the fact that this particular political party is trying to hold on to power. It's so fearful of even humor, right? The Salt Bay kind of impersonation that you described that case really shows the attempt and worry to control all types of information and how people react for fear that in any type of critique of the system, it means its end. And so that is, I think, one concern. And then as you're bringing up the fact of censorship, that one of the ways in which governments can be supported is businesses' own worry of its bottom line and its profit. And so where we all fall into, I think, is these opportunities to share and express our frustrations and then do so right at an international forum like UPR, but continue to voice it. In this really unique kind of panel that we have, I wanted to open up also the opportunity if any one of you have questions to ask one another or wanted us to delve deeper into any points.
I'd like to ask my question Hong Mai, since you both live in countries right now with democracies. I only am familiar with the U.S. system of democracy, but what is it like in Australia and Denmark?
I can go first. I think Denmark or something that was as really stressed on Denmark and the freedom and the rights we have is the education system. Like it's really a free school for everyone and every citizen, which I think is very uncommon even to university, right? It's still free, so you have the rights to educate yourself and really engage in political activities on school and go to clubs. And those are probably the main ways that I have felt um, the rights I have in Denmark is the way that I could educate myself, especially because my parents, who came from Vietnam, they will just push you into the education system, right? And I am fortunate to just go to school and not worry about making a living at the moment and just focus on that part. And there's really Denmark is very casual, even with teachers, which is something it's very different from other European countries too, and the US, right? Like I know the way you address your professors or the way you address teachers is Mr. or Mrs. or and etc. Right? Whereas in Denmark we just do first name. Like everything is first name based. So in those senses, it's very different, and I think that is very uncommon. Um, and it also just opens a space where teachers and students can engage in discussions on kind of like a colleague setting and peer setting and not this type of respect um, or hierarchy. So the way you can engage educationally is very different, and something that is also very like important for Danes to address, whether it's negative or positive, is the freedom of expression and freedom of yeah, just freedom of expression, right? It can even go to like the very like extreme extent where we have had issues about like Mohammed drawings, which was like a huge issue because it is a freedom of expression, right? But for Muslims, this is way like it's very blasphemous to even draw um, anything religious, right? And so in those sense, there was a whole debate on what is freedom of expression, right? And what is the extent of freedom of expression? Because on the other hand, one person was expressing their freedom of expression, whereas the other one felt so disrespected in their religion. So there was just this whole yes, there is freedom of expression, right? But if you go to the extent of harming someone else, then like it's kind of revoking that, right? Um, but yeah, like there's just so much freedom of expression in Denmark to the point that it's too extreme, right? But we can't do anything about it either, in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Mai. Yeah, you bring up a point that actually does happen in the States too. At what point does a level of freedom of expression harm or hurt certain communities? Because we also have levels of discrimination mixed into this human rights, right? And then that there are groups that also need to have their rights heard. That's not just an individual right. That opens up this constant trying to figure out what are the norms that work and is inclusive enough for everyone. I'll just end there because those different themes, much to unpack too. But Hongmei, your thoughts in terms of your experience in Australia?
Yeah. So from my side, I'm a bit different from Mai because she was born in Denmark, but I was born in Vietnam. So growing up in Vietnam, of course, I went to school. It's all normal. And like I said before, some rights we don't even know we have that right. So when I came to Australia, I was shocked with a lot of things happen here. Like even like you can stand up and pick out to your teacher. That never happened in Vietnam. If you stand up and say something back to your teacher, okay, maybe tomorrow you can't go to school and gonna be like parent meeting with teacher, or you can go to the next level of the class. And like I said before, so I went to uni and my teacher stopped me graduation because I talked back to her and about my religion, and this is not right. And in Australia, every week on the weekend, I see a lot of people on the street. They protest for their right or for something about the green, like now climate change, or animal cruelty, like a lot of things, like with something you never think of, like it's gonna happen in Vietnam, but here they can speak out and they can do something about that. Even like you can ask a prime minister or premier quiz if they do something not right. So, but in Vietnam, even like you say something, it's the truth, but about the prime minister or about the government, you go to jail. So it's so different. And here, like Mai said, is sometimes the human rights here they go too extreme, like make me feel like, oh wow, it's really the country I want to live, because in Vietnam we never experienced that. And if you want to say something or if you want to do something, then the persecution is always there, and you go to jail, you can't see your family, and then the worst happens, you can die. So that from my view, a bit like emotional right now, because I just feel really sorry for Vietnamese people, and that one I'm not gonna stop doing thing or like take the action for all the people in Vietnam. Yeah.
Thank you, Hongmei. It speaks a lot, having your experience, sharing it, and seeing the frustration you have, but also the willpower to want to do something off of it. As we get closer to the end of our conversation together, I hope this is just the beginning of many. So I wanted to open it back up to see any last comments, thoughts that was memorable for each and every one of you. We started it out with Tao. Maybe we can start with Hongmei and end with Tao this time.
Yeah, so my last wish today in the conversation. So like before Mai said about the education, like free in Denmark, and that also my wish for a lot of children in Vietnam. Now they can't go to school, and I think that the one of like really basic thing they should have in their life, or even like food in the food for to live, and they don't even have it. So I hope we will never stop fighting for human rights for our people, for Vietnamese, and for women, for all other people, to have their basic rights in their life. Yeah, that what I mean.
Thank you, Mai.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone today that wanted to share their perspective on human rights. I have learned a lot and gained more, I guess, perception of the world and my own rights, and it inspires me to see so many women and young as well that are so I guess up to date with the human rights and how it affects them in their daily lives. And I think it's very it leaves a strong impression on me to see Tao and Homni today sharing their experiences, and for us to see the differences of our upbringing and how it touches our soul. And I guess I also wish that we will continue um, advocating for human rights for everyone, just basic needs too. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Mai. And Tao.
I think this meeting has reinforced this idea that there's a lot of people doing action and actionable change, even if it doesn't seem like it at first, because the news and all the reports and articles we can hear about corruption and the human rights violations in Vietnam and around the world, they can be really dreary, but it's wonderful to see that there's change. And I really hope that this roundtable and the actions of Viet Thanh and hopefully the UN can actually spark change in Vietnam. And I think these nations need to be held accountable for their actions, and I hope that happens.
And with that, I think you all have spoken to the power of collective action, right? When we can connect together. And that's one of the things these governments, in trying to not share about human rights, is to prevent those types of connections from happening. So us being together in all parts of the world, in all time zones right now, is that chance to connect with one another. So thank you so much for your ideas, your insights on this particular topic, and we hope to continue the conversations further.